At YIVO, we call such minds, people with such minds who invent such cities, Luftmenschen. But now we know there is a distinguished history to it. Our next speaker is Regina Khidekel, who will speak about Malevich, Khidekel, and Vitebsk and the Jewish connections.
Still not to lose time, I'm very happy to be here today at the occasion of the exhibition of Lazar Khidekel, and I wish to use this opportunity to thank people who are responsible for that. The entire staff of the YIVO Institute, of course, and Jonathan Brent, the director, who fall in love with works of Lazar Khidekel a few years ago, and had this dream, you know, we all dreamers, to do the exhibition, and finally it's here. Thank you very much. I also would like to thank, of course, Suzanne Leon and Alex, and especially Trisha, for helping with installation, because without Trisha, nothing gonna happen here. Also, I would love to thank our speakers. Thank you very much for coming. And I would love to thank people who are helping us to promote Lazar Khidekel legacy. And Charlotte Douglas, Professor Charlotte Douglas, the president of the Malevich Society, Yulia Tulovskaya from the Malevich Society is very helpful. Also, I would love to thank Martina Bigliardi-Moyer, who is here now from Zurich, who is responsible for initiating a few exhibitions in Zurich, and who continues to promote Lazar Khidekel. And thank you all very much for your continuing support of the Lazar Khidekel project in large. So we are still on the way. And now I, go back to this strange theme. Through the years, I have written a number of articles concerning my father-in-law, Lazar Khidekel, and his connection with the Vitebsk Art School and Suprematism. However, I wasn't until the exhibitions in the Jewish museums in New York and Berkeley that I began to focus on his connections to Judaism and Jewish culture. Not an easy task, because there are opposite points of view of what could be considered as Jewish art and Jewish artists as well. Many believe that following the flourishing Jewish Renaissance in the middle of the 1910s in Russia, abstract art took Jewish artists away from their Jewishness by thrusting them onto the international or post-revolutionary Soviet art scene. Many also believe that Jewish artists hindered the development of realism due to the influence of their culture and traditions. This attitude correlates with Harold Rosenberg's conclusion towards the exhibition policy at the New York Jewish Museum in the mid-60s, which chose avant-garde abstraction and minimalism as distinctive representatives of Jewish culture of the 20th century. In 1995, at the same Jewish Museum, in the exhibit Russian Jewish Artists in a Century of Change, where Lazar Khidekel's works were presented, this outlook of abandoning their Jewish identity in art and trading national in favor of international and universal was expressed again. So I was unsure how to begin this study, and I was skeptical as to whether I would be able to make sense of these connections with the context of suprematist art. However, I was lucky enough to come across a draft of a poem written by late Lazar Khidekel, which I believe pinpoints this very relationship. This document is entitled, "Next, I will write a poem about my life," and I'm going to read it to you now. Like everyone else, I was born under the sky. I will write about how I was born, how I mature, and how at the age of 7 I was so ill that Mama and Papa had to carry me in their arms. Pushing me like a baby in a carriage, Mama cured me through her dreams and suffering. I will write about when I began to learn, how I walked the streets late at night, staring at the sky, at the moon, the clouds. Actually, I have to show you something. So I will write about how I grew up and how I felt my happiness lying in my own hands. And now the revolution broke out, bringing freedom, fraternity, love to the neighbor. How I made my friends, how antagonism faded in the past. The draft reflects not only the image of a dreamer, and this is his late drawing of Vitebsk and maybe Messiah in the sky. Lazar actually had a lot of drawings of Vitebsk. He did it after the war. It's just his memory. The draft reflects not only the image of a dreamer and visionary, but also explains why supremacy theories and abstract concepts so easily fit inside the conscience of a 15-year-old boy as they dealt with growth, future, and progress. For me, this poem also shed light on Lazar's own sense of Jewishness. His preoccupation with the sky, visions of the Messiah, idealism, and belief in the moral values such as love the neighbor are central to Judaism and also reflect Lazar's universal dream shared by Jews in their pursuit of world harmony and perfection. Lazar's spirituality, as reflected in this poem, was later transferred to his art, and the influence of Judaism emphasizes on harmony and positive transformation of the world would later become the key definitions in his theoretical writings and futuristic visionary architecture. Obviously, Lazar came from a strong Jewish tradition. His birthplace was Vitebsk, one of the centers of Hasidism, where Hasidic branch of Chabad was established in the very beginning of 19th century. And Lazar definitely came from the parents from the family which likely belonged to Chabad, according to his prayer book. In 1904, when Lazar was born, the population of the city was Russians 12%, Belarus 22%, and Jews 50%. There were like a few elementary schools. Occupation was flax and wood were sent to Riga. Entire family worked. Lazar also was born into the working family. His father was a skilled maison builder. The mother was a dressmaker. Actually, this is a municipal theater, and his mother was sewing theatrical costumes. Thanks to her connections, Lazar was enrolled in the best primary school, gymnasium. This is gymnasium for boys, where only 5% of Jews were allowed. Before Lazar began to define himself as an artist and visionary architect, he was a student of Marc, Chagall, Lissitsky, and Kazimir Malevich. This is the art school that we already saw before. Marc Chagall, as a great artist and humble man, befriended a gifted student. He took Lazar with him on plane air to the outskirts of Vitebsk, sharing how to see beauty in ordinary places. Chagall, by himself a pilot of painting and the infringer of gravitation, confirmed Lazar's preoccupation with the sky by his flying images commingling earth and sky. Chagallian metaphorical journey over the roof of native Vitebsk, and this is the work of Lazar Khidekel, Roofs of Vitebsk as well, anticipated the suprematist systematic attempt to overcome gravity and to go further in breaking of ordinary logic and perceived order of objective world that goes asunder by flying away in the space by parts like Lazar Khidekel's suprematist constructions. When in 1973 Chagall came to St. Petersburg, to this one was being made under Chagall. Chagall and Lazar Khidekel, who was lying about his age, and you can see him here, he really looks much older than he was. So when Chagall came to St. Petersburg, he met with Lazar Khidekel for the first time after 1920. Chagall's second wife, Valentin Brodsky, Regina and Marc Khidekel were in presence. Chagall was happy to see Lazar, by his words, one of his most talented students, who he believed had a great artistic future. At the end, he signed a few books for Lazar Khidekel, and said that he is always grateful to Lazar, who defended him from this bandit Malevich. As we know, the incapability of both became a reason for Chagall to leave Vitebsk, and in large incapability with the Soviet regime caused his emigration from Russia in 1922. Another Lazar's teacher was Lissitsky. This is a big chapter of his life. But what is interesting now is that it was Lazar who shared with Lissitsky his interest in Jewish cultural heritage, and whom Lissitsky, leaving Vitebsk in 1920, presented with this remarkable work, the interior of a synagogue in Drue, made in 1916, which was a result of his trip organized by the Jewish Ethnographic Society to Eastern Belarus and Lithuania to see and depict the synagogues and Jewish monuments and artifacts. This unique painting was with Lazar till end of his life, and it's still in our family. However, it was Malevich who truly influenced Lazar and his artistic and theoretical development. Malevich's appearance in Lazar's hometown was not accident, as Malevich was invited by Chagall and brought by Lissitsky to Vitebsk in the end of 19 to escape the Moscow threatening cold and darkness, as he described. In comparison with the life in Moscow, and it was a civil war at this time, Vitebsk was an oasis where Malevich could relatively comfortably live and accomplish a series at what would be his life-defining goals. In Vitebsk, Malevich had the opportunity to construct his theory and philosophy of suprematism, on which he produced several publications. He also taught and developed a group of students who energized and inspired him as they enabled him to spread his teachings. We already know how Vitebsk was transformed by Malevich cultural insurgency, which included public lectures, disputes, exhibitions, theater performances, and city festivals. However, another aspect of Malevich's stay in Vitebsk, which is perhaps less explored, deals with the impression and influence the predominantly Jewish city had on him. It was in Vitebsk that Malevich felt the spirit of Jewish mysticism that maybe influenced his own development. In a letter to his friend, philosopher Gershenzon, Malevich wrote about his first impression in Vitebsk. He said that the life is very simple and routine, but everybody is wise, and wisdom of the world is clear and undisputed. These sentiments proved to be important for Malevich's search of a philosophical basis for his artistic series and ultimately led Malevich to see the contrast between Catholic, Orthodox, and Jewish places of worship. Malevich interpreted this contrast as three different expressions of spirituality, including different perceptions, sensations, spiritual gestures, as well as textures, surfaces, colors, and lights. In synagogue was particularly striking to Malevich, as unlike its counterparts, it never stood as the architectural focal point. Malevich wrote that the Jewish temple always stays to the side, and you can almost say it's not there. It's almost not a structure, but rather a reflection of one. The world existing inside is filled of letters, embodying all things living. In the synagogue, I floated over letters, losing my body and blood. Otherwise, I would never have been able to see the sun and that world, says Malevich. Only in the synagogue of letters was Malevich able to escape all material associations and experience an invisible world in almost unconsciousness, being drawn in a meditative state. Also, Malevich's inner polemic with his contemporary Orthodox religious philosopher Fyodor Bulgakov and Bulgakov's appeal to the institutional church with its hierarchy brought Malevich to the idea that God was scattered among individuals. Malevich came to believe that the infinite space of human skull had no boundaries and could embrace the universe, a belief very close to Jewish mysticism and Hasidic teachings that each person has the power to access to the divine. There are so many parallels between religious mysticism and suprematist theories. Of course, it's speculation, my speculations, including Malevich's telescope philosophical cosmism, anti-telescope philosophical cosmism, as a projection of human vision, was able close to Kabbalist acosmic explication of the universe that correlates through the meditation with inner motions of human soul. Malevich's religious exploration influenced his strive for an utopist vision of the future. He shared this vision with his group of students, who, predominantly Jewish in Vitebsk, particularly, were born and raised in the synagogue of letters, and some of them could inherently deal with abstract concepts and system of science. And here is the appearance of Malevich with his gestures. He really was very impressive. For children, I don't know if they tracked it back to this book, but they, accept it as a ritual performance or something like that. Lazar was among the most receptive and talented students, and Malevich fed his young, hungry mind, harnessed his passion, and gave his vision direction and framework. It was through him that Lazar, in a sense, discovered his own Messiah and new religion, Suprematism. Lazar's passion for art was combined with enthusiasm in public work, his participation in social activities such as school student administration responsible for providing the teachers and students with food rations and art supplies, demonstrated his belief in how direct involvement could make the difference in everything. Soon, under Malevich's leadership was formed a group called Unovis. We already heard about this. And Lazar was very active. He was serving as the chief of creative committee. He is an editor and a frequent contributor to Unovis publications. He was a part of selective groups, traveling with Malevich to the conferences and exhibitions to Smolensk and Moscow. He was attracted to teaching as well, a clear indication of well-deserved credibility and confidence on the part of Malevich. In Lazar's theoretical papers of this period, he wrote about the emotion of universal construction, akin to the flowing energy of sensations, of power emerging from the natural material forces concealed from us. His vocabulary began to consist of words and definitions such as life creation, energy economy, cosmism, the perfection, and world transformation. For a number of Vitebsk students, a line between Cubism and Suprematism has become irresistible, and Suprematism was for them the object of study rather than a deeply perceived artistic system, as for Khidekel. Many who have studied Lazar and his art also noted how natural to master geometric abstraction was for him. Suprematism must have been, Lissitsky wrote, it was deeply organic for him to be dealing with abstract geometrical composition, which gave him greater opportunities in the plastic transformation of forms. While, for example, the human figures in Ira, while retaining their connection with nature, are decisively schematized by Khidekel down to their basic outlines and built out of squares, parallelepipeds, and trapezoids. When Lazar was only 16, he coined the neologism aero, to express his global vision of art and architecture that will succeed in the conquest of speed of world space and solve the antagonism between nature and civilization. In Era, you will see it here, the manifesto Lazar issued in 1920, he wrote that while creating a new order of relations between separate elements, Suprematism viewed it as a process of assembling a new organism while guided by law of auto-evolution. In the Unovis, the cosmic instinct was considering a criteria for the fruitfulness of suprematist compositions. The airplanes, takeoff, and free flight served as an intermediate stage in the subjection of the space. This is Unovis publications, and there are articles contributed by Lazar Khidekel and also a chronica which reflects the release of his manifesto Ira, which was done like a few months before the first book which was published here by Malevich, 34 drawings. Here is this young guys, members of Unovis. And this is the famous photograph of a group of Unovis going to Moscow in 1920. He is Lazar Khidekel with his, doing some paintings, and some paintings on the back that we can't really see if it's his paintings or someone else. This is his diploma, and so on. Lazar suprematist forms are elevated and floating in the space between earth and sky as well. His landmark composition series that he considered as his own contribution to suprematist vocabulary, such as this black square split by a cross, kinetic elements of suprematism, concentric circles. It's also his own composition. Also this one with metallic, which was like a higher stage of suprematist. Here is his explanation for concentric circles, how they happen to be. And relate to future cosmism structures like structure in the cosmos, display his preoccupation with space and definitions is balance, weight, weightiness, dynamism, speed, texture, materiality, and dematerialization. They also show his attempt to create a map of a visionary world in which different poles and slides of energy are intercrossing. Most radical of all, however, were his geometric compositions, which were like planar projections of future architecture as seen from the height. Lazar Khidekel was instrumental in transition of suprematism from two-dimensional to three-dimensional, and of defining volumetric suprematism, and created this one of the samples. It goes like that, and this is the Workers' Club, which was the first feasible architectural project that was done in 1926 when Lazar Khidekel was a student of architectural school in Petrograd. Same time, from the mid-20s, Lazar Khidekel was preoccupied with futuristic projects that were shockingly ahead of his time. Iris City, City over water, garden city, floating cities, all of them were united by the idea of lifting constructions over the land, which has to stay untouchable and safe. This care about the land was not only dictated by economical point of view on many others, but also, with the care to preserve land as a sacred substance. There was always a human dream for flight. Icarus, Leonardo in medieval Russia under Tartar invasion. A takeoff was also considered as an attempt to get out of desperation. And the latest sample is one of Ilya Kabakov personages. We know that Russian Kosmism and its proponents, Malevich and Tsiolkovsky, were inspired by Fyodorov's philosophy of the common task, advocating radical life extension, physical immortality, and even resurrection of our ancestors, to whom we have moral obligation to prepare a living space, like cosmic colonies they were talking about. Maybe it sounds even more improbable than a dream of a boy born in claustrophobic pale of settlement to find a livable place for displaced people in air. Lazar never mentioned this, but he also never visited Vitebsk, like Chagall, who told us when we met him in '73 that he was planning to go to Vitebsk, but fears that his heart would not maintain when he will see that there nothing remained from the previous life. During the World War II, Vitebsk was destroyed. No one of 50 synagogues or a single Jewish person survived. After Stalin's death, Lazar built his first post-war modern construction, his own country house, and it was placed on concrete and stone bases and elevated above the earth. His most inspirational competition project of this year's was the Museum of Space Visionary Tsiolkovsky. The Cosmic Theme opened a new round of futuristic projects where abstract concepts and new architectural ideas once more came together in effort to foreseeing the upcoming future. A series of architectural painterly fantasies called by him spacious paintings were developed. This continuation of his youth-inspired space odyssey was another attempt of creating a universal world filled with suprematist installations soaring in the skies. When the ideas of futuristic cities became the tour de force of the Western avant-garde in the 60s, Lazar remained behind the Iron Curtain. At this time, his voice wasn't heard. It would take several decades to be discovered and appreciated by the new generations. Today, internet is full of enthusiasts of Khidekel's art and architecture. The Lazar Khidekel Award for Young Architect was established in Russia. It was recently published by Architectural Think in the USA and reprinted all over. It said, long before Friedman's architecture mobile, Constance New Babylon, and Isosaki's clusters in the air, Khidekel imagined a world of horizontal skyscrapers that, through their suprematist, weightless dynamism, seemed to float ad infinitum across the surface of Earth. Like Nietzschean visionary, clearly ahead of his time, Khidekel not only announced the advent of the suspended cities, he, like Malevich in art, reached a level of abstraction that goes beyond a specific historical period, developing on its weight a regenerating form of architectural avant-garde that always looks to the future and even today, 80 years later, remains revolutionary. I can just add that as Lazar believed in his adolescent messianic dreams, justice finally prevails. Thank you. And this is a